While everybody's making their way in, I'll go ahead and introduce Annette. Annette Hill is a certified psychotherapist, and she's going to tell us why you guys all decided to stay all day. I'm just kidding. Along with her private practice, she trains police, firefighters, and clinicians, and is the program author and former clinical director for a treatment center for veterans and first responders exclusively. Annette is a Gold Star mother, losing her son Adam to post-traumatic stress in 2009. Annette, where'd she go? Did I lose her? Oh, there she is in the back. With the lights, I cannot see. So welcome. I'm really, really happy. I've heard Annette speak several times, and we're delighted that you're back. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. All right. Do we have a mic on? Yes? We're all good? Okay. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I feel pretty humbled and honored to be amongst you. I've been speaking with a lot of you over the last several hours and yesterday, and pretty amazing. I'm really grateful for Matthew going earlier today and talking about the swearing. I tend to do that a lot. My first career was in contracting, and when my son was 12, he said, "Mom, you cuss too much." So I'm going to try not to, because I'm also going to try to honor what Kirk said and said, you know, that words matter. So I'm going to try to elevate it a tiny bit. Post-traumatic stress disorder is as old as dinosaurs chasing people around out of caves. And post-traumatic stress disorder is a human experience, not a veteran experience. Veterans seem to get the lion's share of attention around this issue, but it is actually a human experience. It is a normal response to an abnormal situation. I know that you guys have heard that phrase before, but it actually tells you that your brain is working correctly. What I want to do today is I want to normalize, and I also want to give you a little bit of hope. A lot of people sitting in this room probably have had either post-traumatic stress symptoms or post-traumatic stress disorder. I call it the other IED, and I'm going to explain to you why I came up with that idea a long time ago. So post-traumatic stress, again, a normal response to an abnormal situation. It is any sort of life-threatening or deeply emotionally threatening experience will oftentimes result in these symptoms. The D is what is disorder, but that seems to be something that causes people to feel very stigmatized. So why don't we look at the D as duration? D is when those symptoms, and we're going to talk about those in a minute, last for a lot longer than a month, 2 months, 3 months, and your brain starts to loop and loop. And that means that there needs to be extra attention. We started the conference today talking about Simon Sinek and his book, Why. And so I have a couple of whys that I'm here, and I'll weave those in throughout the course of my talk with you today. I had post-traumatic stress disorder when I was in my mid-30s. I was drugged and raped by somebody in my church. And I was in an entirely different career. I was a contractor, I was an interior designer, commercial and residential, and I didn't understand anything about post-traumatic stress. Nobody even talked about it back then. And I'm an old lady, nobody used that phrase. And I was having nightmares, and my body was not belonging to me. I felt really quite hijacked. I avoided people and places. Again, I had nightmares every night. My wardrobe even changed. Over the course of months and weeks and months, I started wearing very baggy things, black and gray, and I didn't even notice that I was doing that. It's just subconscious behaviors. Easily startled at the office, and it was just really strange. So eventually I decided to go get some counseling, and we did a lot of talk therapy, and that really wasn't getting me anywhere. In fact, I hate to admit this, but I would drive up to the therapist's office, and I thought, I just need to throw back a slug of alcohol. I cannot take going in there and talking about this even one more time. And it was in the very last part of our work when I was telling her I probably wasn't going to come back. She said, well, let's try this other thing called EMDR. And we did do that. And that very first session is when my nightmares stopped. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that because later on I go on to become a certified EMDR therapist, just being so taken aback by this. The other reason that I'm here, my why, is because I've been in this field for nearly 20 years. And I worked with children and adults. I spent a lot of time working with veterans and first responders. I was part of a group called Operation Freedom Bird, where in Arizona, it's a 30-year-old charity. We take 50 combat vets to DC every year to do some pretty intense work. It's a 4-day healing journey. And watching people change by turning around and facing their pain, by not just avoiding it or numbing it, but turning around and literally facing it. World War II, Korean vets, Vietnam veterans, and all the way down, OIF or OEF vets, turning around and facing. This is why I'm here. I want to give you hope. You're not here to listen to the speakers so that you can see how our experience is. What you're here for truly is your why. You're here to find some hope. You're here to see if such things are possible. And I think all of us are here trying to convince you that it is. In your line of work, in the veteran community, your job is to desensitize, to lose your individuality in order to become part of that bigger group, the military, and to become part of that mission. Recovery and returning back to yourself, transitioning, fully transitioning, means that you need to resensitize. You need to let that blood flow through all of those emotional channels once again. So what I'm looking for today is if maybe we would consider, to go back to the concept that was just presented, I want you to consider that post-traumatic stress symptoms might actually be trying to help you. That maybe the point of having post-traumatic stress is that your body is trying to send you a signal that something is not okay. And that if you can turn around and embrace the symptoms, turn around and face the symptoms, looking like a detective for a clue of where your brain is trying to tell you something and heal, you might actually find that doorway. It struck me when I was sitting at home and doing that horrible thing that family members have to do when your loved ones are away in combat, and that's watch the goddamn evening news. And the whole improvised explosive device issue was just everywhere. And just the most random and benign objects were causing horror and terror and just catastrophic destruction. And I thought, you know, this is what PTS symptoms feel like. They feel like an intrusive emotional disturbance. It's an internal IED. Ooh, that was awful. Sorry, I won't do that again. It's like your body no longer belongs to you. It feels like you're hijacked, and I know I'm preaching to the choir. Secondary post-traumatic stress symptoms can happen to the people who love you. Sleeping with somebody who has post-traumatic stress is a very interesting experience. When they wake up kicking and nightmaring, right? When you are, again, at home watching your loved one running at bullets all day long, you also have secondary symptoms. The reaction to the attack is really the cluster of symptomology, the intrusive thoughts, the constant reminders. What your brain is trying to do is tell you that something is not right. So why? Why is this constant looping? Why do these symptoms appear after all this time, late onset post-traumatic stress? You know, I seem to be okay for a time while I was there, but then I come home and I'm not okay. I always use a metaphor of a sunburn with my clients. So you're outside, you're working in the lawn, or you're playing with your kids on the beach, you're having a great time, you're focusing on fixing the car or doing whatever it is you're doing. You come in, you eat dinner, you take a shower, you turn off the lights, and suddenly, in the darkness of your room, your skin is on fire. And you think, oh my God, what happened? The agonist, the sun, is not in the room with you at that time, but that's when you notice the symptoms. When you are focused in the heat of combat or doing the thing that you are doing, that's not when the symptoms are going to present. It's when your body is calm and you're not focused, it's when the symptoms start to come up. Kind of like if you've been working in the yard and you got splinters all in your skin and you pick out the majority of them. Over the course of time, those deep-seated splinters are going to try to work their way up, because just like the skin that wants to be healthy, so does your brain. So what I want you to do is answer the damn question, all right? Why is it that those symptoms are happening now? And why is it that I should turn around and look at them? But your motive matters. People like me in my line of work are not trying to get you to just turn around and look at these symptoms just to make you feel bad. We're trying to go back and find aspects of you that have been frozen in time, that you didn't have time to pay attention to. You heard the other speakers today talk about that in the heat of combat, if my best friend dies right next to me, I don't have time. In fact, I may not even have time to render aid. I have to keep going. But you are, at your core, a feeling human being. And I'm going to make the case for that in a second. And you have to go back and, again, let the blood flow into this part of into your body. All right, so here's the foundation of what we're going to talk about today. I want to teach you the physiology of why your brain does what it does. In your line of work, you know, you're taught how to take apart your weapon and put it back together again practically in your sleep, how to you know, attend to your vehicle. But whoever teaches you how to drive this, you know, this is the thing that causes you great joy or tremendous misery. So this is a theory that was put forth many, many years ago by Paul MacLean. So the brain is organized a little bit more complex than this, but this actually is a great model. It's called the triune brain. So the thing I want you to write down, if you don't really get much more out of this lecture today, I want you to remember these concepts, that the only reason that you've got gray matter in your head, that exquisite lump of goo between your ears, is to keep you physically and emotionally safe. Physical and emotional safety are paramount. And love and connection and being efficient at what you do, self-supporting, those are all the ultimate of safety. Now, what gets all the airtime is physical safety, but emotional safety is every bit as important. In your military career, you learn to override some of the out-of-the-box safety features that come with this. At the base of your brain is, in that red section, it's called the limbic system, but we're going to call it the sensing brain because its function is actually to control your heart rate, your body temperature. When you feel a sense of anxiety, it's the part that makes your stomach hurt. And that we're going to call it the sensing brain. It's connected to the brain stem, and to it, all time is now. The next part of the brain that develops is a very complex midbrain, and it's called the limbic system. But we're going to call it the emotional brain because it's the part of the brain that records how situations feel, the emotional salience, how it smelled, and how you felt about it at the time. But remember, in your line of work, you've learned to override these two regions of the brain. And where you really spend a fair amount of your time is in the top part, the neocortex, that whole outer crust of your brain. And we're going to call it the logical brain. It's the part of abstract thinking, of logic. It's the part that is in executive functioning right now. It's the part of the brain that says, gosh darn it, I've been sitting here all darn day. I'm really tired. I want to go home and shower before we go to that cool thing tonight. But it would really hurt her feelings if I got up and left. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to tough it out. That's the part that's running it right now. The neocortex, or the logical part of the brain, actually you get the last part of that brain in your later teens, early 20s. And what's interesting about that, again, for you, is that's when a lot of you join the military. So as your brain is actually creating those last, most incredible features, it's actually getting bathed in trauma. It's getting bathed in all kinds of stress hormones. And that does make a difference. Inside of the emotional brain, or the limbic system, is a little tiny organ called the amygdala. And I'm assuming many of you have heard that. It's the seat of fight, flight, and freeze. And all of those give you the option to survive. Because remember, the brain's job is to survive, physically and emotionally. And it's seated real close to that sensing part of the brain, because if I have to, run or drop to the ground or, take my hand off the stove, I don't want to spend all that precious neurochemistry going up to my logical brain. I don't need to think about those kinds of things. I just need it to happen now. So another part, and something else I want you to write down, is the number 2. So the number one thing, the number one job of your brain is to keep you physically and emotionally safe. The number 2 thing I want you to remember, that if you are physically or emotionally attacked, if you believe you're being physically or emotionally attacked, you will defend 100%. Remember the cool, funny videos that you just saw in the last presentation, yeah, those were things that appeared on the video in the circumstances that the people that were getting upset was because of, right, the things that were happening to them. But the thing that was happening, the thing that was happening internally was that the person was feeling emotionally threatened. And so they attacked, right? They attacked by either withdrawing, by going at the other person who's causing them harm. So remember these 2 points. The other part I want you to remember, sorry, I keep thinking my brain is up here. It's up here. The logical part of the brain, the main job is to make meaning out of everything. Every single thing that you do, even from your earliest moments on the planet, before you even have words, meaning is being made. Who's safe? Who's not? Who can I trust? Who can't I trust? Can I do it? And then as words develop, you start to create what's called core beliefs. There are agreements that you make with yourself. The last speaker was talking about, the importance of words and the way that you interface with other people. And as he said, the words that you say to yourself are really important. The beliefs that you have, the I statements, are the ones that are going to keep you efficient and emotionally okay, or those are the ones that are going to cause you to go into a dark, dark place. I can't do it. I should have known. It should have been me. If these are some of the thoughts that are at the core and the foundation based on some of your experiences, these are the things that are going to cause you to loop and loop and loop. So in order to become fully functioning again, we have to allow the brain to heal in all 3 regions. And doing talk therapy can get you a fair amount of recovery in that L, the logical part of the brain, but it takes some of these other modalities to get to the emotional brain, to get to the physiological piece of you. And when you can heal those things all at the same time, it feels a lot like having a leg that's fallen asleep, and you stand up and you've got to put that foot on the ground, and you know that it's going to hurt. But if you don't get blood flow back into that leg, you're going to fall. A lot of times that's why people want to avoid going to psychotherapy or going to counseling, because they don't want to have that feeling. But in order to bring you back, to have you fully transition, you have to be able to reconnect with aspects of you that have been frozen in time, that are numb and deadened. Alfred, Freud, and Jung, the boys, the guys that are, the fathers of psychotherapy. I'm a real Adlerian person. I like that Alfred Adler has this comment, all behavior is purposeful. We are not driven by a cause, but drawn by our goal. So remember, if the overarching goal at every foundational moment is about physical and emotional safety, if you are perceiving that you are not, based on those core beliefs, the meaning that you have made, you're going to feel different. After I was assaulted in my mid-30s, I started to think that certain people, places, and things were not safe. I didn't have that sort of innocence that I had before. I didn't trust people the way that I did. I didn't even have to think about it. It just was. And so all of my behaviors started to follow in line with that. So when you start to lose aspects of who you are in a way that is interrupting your life, not in the way that you sort of an act of your will gave up aspects of your life for the greater good, for the cause of the mission, but when you have post-traumatic stress, the meaning is shifted. Those are the areas that we want you to go back and look for. So why do symptoms suddenly seem to be worse in certain, people, places, and things when I am around, around certain people, places, and things? Why does that happen? Why did the clusters of events seem to make it bad? I think it's just life. There's no sound here. Is there a sign? Oh, that was the one. Yay, techno. That's okay. My sound's all the way up. This feeling of trapped. Remember, if a person feels physically or emotionally threatened, they will defend. When you go into a position of feeling trapped, you're like a caged animal and you want out. And the ultimate getting out, oddly, sadly, is suicide. It's the ultimate escape. And the more trapped that you feel by life events coming at you, you know, money and kids and the job and, you know, relationships and being around certain things, your emotions start to narrow, your logic starts to narrow, and you become sort of pin-dotted. And you can move to a position where you start to believe, without a whole lot of thought, that the world would be better off without you, that I can't take it anymore. No matter what I do, it's not enough. I have to put up with this to get what? And you will move toward those actions. You put some substances on board and the logical parts of your brain go offline and you're more inclined. At 22 a day, we know that this is a truth, more than 22 a day. This was given to me by a veteran that I was working with. He was seeking treatment, VA style. And they're so overwhelmed that this was what they were prescribing at the time. The issue is that while these kinds of things may help with some symptom reduction, meaning the physiological parts may calm down a little bit, or it may help the brain structures to be a little more malleable to change, it really doesn't help you to change your meaning. To change the meaning of something, you have to go and do it. You have to lift the weight. You know, you had to go to your boots, you had to go to your different training, you had to go and prove to yourself by action that you could face your fears, that you could achieve things that are superhuman, you know, rappelling out of a helicopter onto a moving train. I mean, who does that? You guys do that. But you had to do that. This kind of treatment isn't going to get it done. A lot of the modalities that are out there, yoga and mindfulness, again, all really good for calming the physiology so that you can calm down enough to be able to access that logical part of the brain. But you have to go back in and you have to start that examination. So the other reason that I'm here today is for my son. This is Adam. And as was said in the introduction, I'm a Gold Star mom. Adam was my only child, and he's a two-tour Iraq veteran, and he was discharged with a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress. And if you notice the date, 9 years ago and 3 days was his death. 9 years ago today, I was writing his eulogy. So part of the reason that I'm here is I don't want any one of your family members to go through what I'm going through. This is the hell you don't wake up from. To become a Gold Star family member, you're your service member dies in war or because of war. And I'm the latter. That slide that didn't have the sound, you know, a collision of events. That's what happened to Adam. He was in work full-time, university. He was going to be a cop. He was in school, or he was working full-time in security. He was in school full-time to get his criminal justice degree, and he was living with a woman. He wanted to hurry and catch up in relationship. He felt that all of his peers had left him behind. And he suspicioned that something was going south. And in those last moments, he discovered that she had been having an affair the whole time. And what we are understanding about the 22 a day is that for more than 40%, it is a relationship issue. I think Matt talked about intimacy this morning. It's something that we all crave and need. Remember, physical and emotional safety, right? Emotional safety, love, connection. You finally let your guard down. You know, you guys love your peers, you love your fellow military members, you know, more than your spouses, we know that. And you finally let your guard down, and so to be betrayed is particularly difficult. But how do people have arguments with you if you are that fragile? How does somebody tell you a preference if you blow up every time that you feel emotionally threatened because you are at that post-traumatic stress? Your resting rate never comes to, you know, a 10 or a 25. You're always at a pitched level, so it doesn't take you much to pop off at 100. Does that make sense? Mission 22 came and asked if Adam could be part of the War at Home Memorial. So my son is the one there with the rifle pointing straight up. It was him standing on a Stryker vehicle. He was in the 172nd. It's a 10-foot by 5-foot steel silhouette, and there are 20 silhouettes there, and they are traveling the country right now to bring awareness to veteran suicide. This is the other part of my why. And even though this was a really wonderful honor to have Adam as part of that, it's a horrific, catastrophic thing to love on a piece of steel for the rest of my life. So I'm asking you, entertain the idea that maybe post-traumatic stress is trying to give you a signal. There are a couple of things, 3 things I want to talk about that actually impact your ability to recover from post-traumatic stress. TBI. Thank goodness football players are bringing it to attention, because it wasn't enough, right, that veterans were having this issue, right? But closed open head injuries and closed head injuries. How many blast waves have you been exposed to in your career? How many of you played sports, contact sports, you know, in high school and elementary school, soccer and football? How many car accidents have you been in? Every traumatic brain injury is different. The recovery from it is different. The amount of time that passed before the attention, all of that. But we live in a time when there are some pretty amazing treatments out there for TBI. In a 20-year study of over 200,000 people, it showed that the risk of suicide rises 3-fold just after 1 mild concussion, with suicides tending to happen around 6 years after the initial trauma on average. Pretty staggering, isn't it? If you have not had a thorough examination of your noggin, please do that. The VA owes you at least that much. The other concept that is making the rounds is trying to tease out some of the overlapping symptoms with post-traumatic stress. Over the last few years, maybe you guys have heard this concept called moral injury. The idea is that, again, even though some of the symptoms overlap, they are distinctly different. So with post-traumatic stress, remember, this is a typical reaction to feeling physically or emotionally threatened. You can either be a witness or a victim of some sort of attack toward you, deep, abandonment, or of a huge fight, where you're more of on the victim side, and it's a more fear-driven set of symptomology. Moral injury, on the other hand, is associated more with being the agent of or failing to prevent. You do something that goes against your moral code. And these are the things that start to help you to worry more about what you did do, what you didn't do, and those core beliefs start to get infected in there. A little bit more shame and guilt-driven. Shame is an I am, and guilt is an I did or I didn't. Combat guilt was the most significant predictor of both suicide attempts and preoccupation with suicide, suggesting that guilt may be an important mediator. This is interesting. In my work, I have noticed, I've never read this anywhere, but I noticed that when you look at somebody who is dealing with post-traumatic stress, and again, trying to tease out the symptom overlapping with possible moral injury, I always find that there's a common thread, and that's betrayal. So it's one thing, betrayal means that there had to be some level of trust. It's different than just having a crime committed, on you. Somebody running a red light and hitting the car. There's a level of trust that we're all supposed to be following the rules of the road. But if it's somebody that I know, if it's somebody that I trusted, earlier today, several times today, you know, my country betrayed me, you know, my battle buddy betrayed me, you know, the woman that my son was dating betrayed, you know, I trusted you. Follow that thread, and oftentimes you'll find the root of your issue. But I also want you to go all the way back to your childhood. Oftentimes, you know, two people experiencing the same traumatic incident, say in combat, you'll find that the symptoms present just a little differently, or the core beliefs are a little different. And if you follow that thread all the way down to your youth, you sometimes will find a common theme, that the type of betrayal is similar. And when you're doing trauma work, you always want to go for the earliest foundational moments. If you are seeking treatment for trauma, and somebody says to you that you will suffer that forever, I want you to punch them in the throat and walk away. It's not true. And I'm living proof of that. Now, that doesn't mean that you might not live with some scars. That does not mean that you won't have some upset at the anniversaries of. Clearly, you saw me have mine here, because it's, you know, anniversaries are rough. I miss him terribly. I always will miss him terribly. But I don't have those thoughts intruding on me. I can use the word rape, and I don't feel physiologically weird about that. I know it's a fact of my history, but I have learned and I have grown from it. I want you to have the faith that that can happen. There's this wonderful book called The Choice. If you can get your hands on it, please do. It was written by this woman, Edith Eva Edgar, and she was at age 16 in Auschwitz. She and her mother and her sister, and she wrote this incredible book. She's a psychotherapist, she's a PhD, and she's in her 80s now, but she wrote this. When we force our truths and stories into hiding, secrets can become their own trauma, their own prison. I had a secret, and my secret had me. What's interesting about her story is that she was a psychotherapist, and a quite famous one at the time, but she had not actually faced her core trauma. In her 40s, she finally decided to go back to Auschwitz and stare down her demons. And that's when she started to become free, when she was able to be more present, when she wasn't so triggered by the stimuli, by, you know, seemingly random objects like an IED on the side of the road that just cause you to feel like you don't belong to yourself. Everything, Viktor Frankl, how many of you have read his book, Man's Search for Meaning? An incredible book. He also was in Auschwitz. He was a psychologist at the time when he was taken captive. And like I said to you before, that the logical part of your brain is always trying to make meaning out of everything. The upshot of his book is he's trying to make meaning out of something that is so catastrophic. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Post-traumatic stress makes you feel like you have no choice. I do believe that. You don't have a choice to not go to the ground of the car when you hear that sound, or when, you know, you hear that song, you know, you go back to that heartbreak. And I think that by making the decision to turn around and go back and get pieces of you will give you that sense of freedom. Now, sometimes the thing that you have the upset about, the guilt, the shame, is legit. Maybe you did do something dopey. Maybe you did something pretty horrific. Maybe you didn't do something. Maybe you are partly to blame, and you want to look at that too. Don't leave that stone unturned. When Adam died, I went all the way back to when he was 4. I mean, we do that, everybody, you must have done this with people that you have lost, you know. If I had done this, if I hadn't done that. I mean, I thought, if I hadn't turned left at 32nd Street instead of right, would my son still be alive? And we go through that. That's part of the brain's attempt to heal. Because what you want is to be physically and emotionally safe. What I want to be able to do is make the meaning correct so that I can predict what is physically and emotionally safe. And until I update that hard drive to what is correct, or I make amends, or I learn to change the behavior, that's what your training camps are all about, right? Your training events. You were supposed to be making the mistake so that you can get back on that rope or get behind that weapon and do it differently. Right? That's what AAR is all about, right? You are meant to do that. This is no different. Make a living amends. If you did something and you cannot go back and apologize, you can't go back and undo or let the people in your life know that what you did was wrong and that you get it, then do something symbolic. Give of your time, give of your money, do something that helps you to move through that pain and that grief. Constipated grief is one of the most difficult things that a person can deal with. Our culture does not teach really anything about grief, right? We just buy a new one, get another one. We just kind of move on. But you have to go back and allow your body to feel those feelings. Because if you don't, look, you're not going to die if you feel your feelings, but you will die if you don't. I almost can guarantee it. And you may be existing, but you're not living. You need to put the blood back in the leg that has fallen asleep for days and weeks and months and years. And yeah, it's going to hurt a little bit. But you know what? You're hurting anyway. So why not hurt with a point? Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. You know, even a lifeguard who is going out to drag a drowning man in a lake knows to wait until that person surrenders. You heard earlier, you know, in the halls of AA, you've got to surrender. But, you know, in your line of work, surrender is not kind of a welcomed word. But you've got to surrender to help so that you can be rescued. And a lifeguard knows not to touch the person who is in the middle of the lake kicking. Everybody just kind of backs off until the person just stops all of that behavior. And then you can come in and get the help. And know that your skills, the things that you have learned, can generalize into other domains of your life, other aspects of your life. You know, being resilient, not quitting, coming at something from a different angle, making use of the circumstances on the ground, thinking clever, you know, attaching to others, being intimate. Again, not sexual intimate, intimacy. Show someone your vulnerable side. Let them in. One of the things that in psychotherapy we do, I did this a lot at Warrior's Heart, which is the treatment center where I was the author and the clinical director. And I've worked at a number of treatment centers. And we do this thing called the lifeline. And it's a long piece of paper, and we write out all of the major events, positive and negative, from birth to present day. It's a monster of a project. And then the person is meant to stand up and present to the group really everything. They're meant to tell them all of the guts of their life. And what's interesting is when you listen to a person tell the story of their life, you will hear that bad and maladaptive meaning. You'll hear the I should have known. I should have been able to overcome, you know, maybe something that you thought you could do as a little 5-year-old, you know, against a perpetrator who was a lot bigger than you. That you should have been able to take care of your siblings, or you should have been able to stop that train or that bullet. That you should have. And when you start to challenge, really, you know, you probably did the best that you could with what you had on board at the age or the time. Then you start to update the hard drive to the facts about what is. Not the magical thinking, the woulda, shoulda, about something that didn't exist. It's an incredibly powerful experience to have somebody go through and talk about and take the partitions out. You know, you learn to compartmentalize, which is actually a frankly healthy thing for you when you're in the middle of a firefight. I frankly don't want you feeling your feelings. You know, shut it down, Mr. Brain Surgeon, when you're in my guts, or my, you know, surgeon in my body. Shut it off. But you have to take those partitions out when you get home, when you're in the privacy of yourself. You need to allow intimacy to invade every part of you again, to connect, to live. You need to integrate, and doing trauma work will get you there. So there is a gift of learning that comes through pain. You know, for whatever reason, God wired us in such a way that we really don't learn that much from the good things. We really learn from the bad. We're really negatively inclined. Because remember, your brain's job is to keep you physically and emotionally safe. So it's really scanning all the time for those kinds of things. And then you update that hard drive over and over again, frankly, every night when you go to sleep and dream. That's when your brain updates. Where you know that you're not is when you start to loop. When you start to have dreams or nightmares that are themed, That's when you know, that's when you want to zero in, and you want to get a good clinician that will help you do that. Now, I shared earlier that I am a huge fan of EMDR, and as part of that, post-traumatic growth is an outcome. This is a very well-researched, please just look up that term, post-traumatic growth. And what happens is that you will, again, have the facts of what happened to you as part of your story, but you no longer are governed by the feelings that were attached to them. You have meaning that is adaptive, not maladaptive. As part of the EMDR modality, Francine Shapiro, more than 40 years ago, as she was creating and perfecting and researching over and over again this modality, she uses the phrase adaptive information processing. What happens when you actually go to sleep at night and during the day as you continue to talk and talk through issues and you finally come to a resolution is that the brain stores data not linearly. That's not very efficient. It stores our data in an associative network. So things associate with something else. So as soon as you think of one thing, it'll think of another. So here's a perfect example. If I sharpened a number 2 pencil and I said, here, smell this, where would you go? Exactly. 100% of people will say that. It's a stupid pencil, right? But you have that so paired with elementary school that you will go there immediately. Songs from a traumatic breakup, who doesn't go there, right? Or from your high school years, or from your time in combat. Smells, time of year, all of those things are going to bring you to your associative network. What happens when you are triggered to something that is running right into that maladaptive thinking, you're going to go into fight, flight, or freeze. Because remember, the last time that was a part of your world, you nearly died or you were abandoned or something emotionally or physically caused you to be very, very unsafe. Now, I'm dating myself by saying this, so some of you youngins here won't get this reference. But that amygdala, that little organ, that little almond-shaped organ, it's like in, was it Will Robinson, Danger, Danger? What was that quest? Lost in Space, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's what that amygdala is doing all the time. It is scanning, scanning, scanning for sight, smells, sound, for anything remotely that's going to come as a threat to you. The look on someone's face. I can raise an eyebrow. As Kirk said earlier, the tone of my voice, how I lean into you, you're going to know whether I mean you harm or not. And your ability to assess that and know whether or not you can maintain your safety is a big part of how you're going to react, whether that means something. So every night, you know, you will have a set of circumstances that you're dealing with. You know, maybe you had an argument with a friend or a boss or somebody, and at night you're laying in bed. We've all had this experience. You're laying in bed and you start to ruminate about that thing, and your muscles get tight and you breathe a little harder and you keep turning over trying to get comfortable, and you notice that your breathing is heavy, and finally you fall asleep. You wake up the next morning and you think about that fight, but your heart rate doesn't go fast, you don't breathe real heavy, your muscles don't get that tight. Because what happens in the middle of the night is that you actually digested some of the emotional piece of that. At night, the neocortex, that outer part of the brain, goes offline, right? You're asleep. And the part of the brain that needs to digest is that limbic system, that middle part, the emotional content. So your brain weaves together this wackadoo story that you would never want to share with anybody because, and what's happening is it's using points of reference of times in your life or things that are similar, and it weaves the story together where you have mastery, where you come out on top. Now, that is if you are able to have a storyline that works. If the themes continue to repeat and you keep waking from those, that means that the brain does not have a point of reference. And it's kicking you into the awake state saying, I got nothing. Okay, neocortex, you take over. Figure this out. I can't make this happen. What's incredible about EMDR is that you see it in live time. You're awake. It's not hypnosis or anything like that. But EMDR, it focuses on all 3 regions of the brain while you're awake. And it's challenging you to go and zero in on the physiological, the emotional, the meaning that you made to the specific event. And then by looking at it over and over, you start to desensitize. What's lovely is that you're in a safe environment. You know, some of the exposure therapy, you know, having to go and be in the actual place where an event happened can be so flooding to people that they oftentimes won't stay with that treatment. But EMDR, you actually, you think of it, but you're in the safety of a room with somebody and you kind of go into the moment and you come out. What's also interesting is that because your brain stores data in an associative network, your brain will ping pong around all over your life for anything else that follows that maladaptive thinking. And all of that gets desensitized too. So when I had that assault in my mid-30s, and I said to the clinician, she said, "What is it that you want from our time?" And I said, "I want what I know to match with what I feel, because they do not." I know that this isn't my fault, but I can't not think that somehow it wasn't. And so doing that work, just not through talking, but through allowing my mind to just go through its associative network, I was able to sort of desensitize to that, plus everything else, all the way back down into my childhood that kind of went along that thread. I always say when I'm doing therapy, I don't want to just clean the room, I want to clean the house. I want to get it all. I want to sweep through every room and clear it, so that when you leave, that shit is just something that is in your history, and it is something that you've learned from, so that you could be fully present, that you can be reactive in the way that you want, not the way that your body is dragging you around out of your will, right? Where you have to think, what was wrong with me? Why did I do that? Here's a metaphor that will stick with you. I'm glad we're a little bit beyond lunch. So I always look to the physical self to try to get the understanding of what happens up here, gray matter. So think of it this way. All during the day, I eat. We had just a fabulous lunch, right? So you eat, it's a momentary experience. Food goes down, goes into here, and I don't think about it again. And maybe I'm feeling a little bit, stomach distended because it was a good lunch, a big lunch, maybe Thanksgiving dinner. Go to bed, I wake up, and overnight something pretty magical has happened here. Body has taken what it needs, and waste comes out the other end, and we're all good to go. My pants fit normally again. But let's pretend that I just don't like the smell of that part of the morning. I don't like the way that stuff smells at all. So you know what? I'm just not going to do it again. I'm just not going to take a crap ever, because I don't like it. So I just keep eating, and I keep eating, and I keep eating. What do you think's going to happen in here? Just say it loud. Oh, you want me to say it? Come on now. What's going to happen? Yeah, you're going to get toxic. And it's coming. Right? Oh, it's going to come out. But it's going to come out when I don't want it to come out. And if I keep swallowing that, because I don't want that either, I'm going to die. Your brain has to learn. It has to make meaning. And every time you continue to avoid the emotional state, you are at your core an emotional person. You are actually driven by that emotional and that limbic system and the physiological. That's actually the part that drives you. It's what causes you to go toward or away from anything. You've learned to override that with that neocortex, but that doesn't mean that this still isn't here, needing to deal with it. So technically what you are is emotionally constipated. So what we've got to do is get up in there and clean that out. Does that make sense? That's pretty disgusting. You won't forget that. So in your line of work, you will say, to the guy to your left, the gal to your right, I will take a bullet for you. And you know that they would take a bullet for you as well. And hell, you guys will even take a bullet for people you've never met, maybe even for me. But what I'm asking you today is, I know that you would die for each other, you might even die for me, but would you live for me? Would you take that harder route? And I don't mean exist for me, I mean, will you live? Will you find that piece of you that exists pre-combat, pre-trauma, and will you allow yourself to update your hard drive? It's time for you to come home. It's time for you to come all the way home. Thank you very much.